So what I wanted to do in this video was respond to an article that was posted on Detroit Hockey Now by Kevin Allen from earlier yesterday. Now I will say there is a little bit of a caveat to this because the title of the post says plus in it, which makes me think that this is supposed to be an exclusive article, but at the time of me recording this audio, the thing is still public for everybody to read, so I don't know if they've configured the website properly, but assuming this is actually just a free article and something that you could go out there and read yourself, I'm going to go out there and screenshot this because I do think it brings up some very interesting ideas, and because if you want to read this yourself, the option for you to do that will be in the description. So, this article is going over the Vancouver Canucks and the Detroit Red Wings, and how Steve Yzerman might have made a really good move here. The Red Wings traded Filip Hronek because they saw this coming. Now, what exactly is this that the article is referring to? Well, if you've been paying attention to this YouTube channel, you would have seen all the conversations about Vancouver Canucks and former Detroit Red Wings defenseman Filip Hronek, and how this is a guy who might have very well priced himself out of the Vancouver Canucks. He reportedly wants something in the $8 million AAV range, he is an RFA with an expiring contract, and at 26 years old, 6 feet 187, you could say that he might be at that prime, poised age to get that kind of a dollar amount. It's just whether or not the Vancouver Canucks want to be the team that pays him that remains to be seen. Hronek had 48 points in 81 games played this season, which is a career high in terms of assists and points. He had an incredible start to the season, but trailed off in the second half, and that was highlighted by the only 2 points that he had scored in 13 playoff games. But when it comes to Filip Hronek, the fact is he was a former wing, and he was a guy that did have some good point production. 38 points in 60 games played in his final season with Detroit, and a lot of Red Wings fans, from the moment the trade was made, said that this was going to be a great move. Because the Wings got themselves a first-round pick, they used it to draft Axel Sandin-Pellikka. It was a pretty good win-win because the Red Wings got younger, the Canucks got immediate help, and for Filip Hronek starting out the season that he did earlier in 2023, he was an absolute beast. Scoring points like crazy, being a legitimately dangerous pairing option with Quinn Hughes, Filip Hronek was awesome. And then we started to see the hindsight Harrys. Red Wings fans throughout November and December saying, hey, wait a minute, we traded this guy away, he's so good now, what happened? But then you had a lot of other Red Wings fans saying, okay, calm down, like, just because Filip Hronek is looking like an absolute top-pairing defenseman on Vancouver to start out 23-24 does not mean the Wings made a mistake in trading him. And I made that point very clear as well in the multiple videos that we made about that subject, that the trade was a win-win. Filip Hronek taking ice time away from Moritz Seider and not having much value into the long term because he was going to be an RFA soon, these were not things that would help Detroit. You know what does help Detroit? Trading for a guy like Axel Sandin-Pellikka, opening up a roster spot and giving more development time to guys like Seider and other right-handed defensemen in the pipeline. Filip Hronek, for as good as he was, helped the Vancouver Canucks and was better on Vancouver than he ever could have been with Detroit. So, let's go over to the article on Detroit Hockey Now and read what Kevin Allen has to say in regards to the Hronek conversation. Steve Yzerman caught many by surprise 14 months ago when he moved defenseman Filip Hronek to the Islanders for a first and second round pick. Hronek was a proven right-shot defenseman in the prime of his career, but two factors that played heavily into his decision to make the deal is that he thought he would have difficulty re-signing Hronek on his next contract and felt as if the offer from the Canucks was a good offer for a rebuilding team. Now, the opening sentence should say Vancouver Canucks and not the Islanders, but let's move on here. Kevin Allen here writes that Yzerman was right on both counts. The Red Wings, needing to re-sign Moritz Seider and Raymond, are tighter on cap space than they want to be. Maybe more important, the first-round pick they acquired from Vancouver, initially the Islanders pick, became ASP. With Simon Edvinsson now penciled in as a regular, Axel Sandin-Pellikka, pick 17th, is Detroit's top defensive prospect. There also was a conversation about the other picks that they got in that trade and what they used on them. Brady Cleveland, big shout out over to him. Meanwhile, there is anxiety in Vancouver over Hronek's contract negotiations. He reportedly turned down Vancouver's offer of an 8-year deal worth an AAV of $6.5 million. The article then breaks down that Hronek is now in conversations with the Carolina Hurricanes and Marty Necas, and everybody's talking about that. The bottom line is, Kevin Allen writes, Hronek could certainly help the Wings, but he wasn't going to transform them into a contender. As much as it pains fans, the Wings have not yet exited rebuild mode. They'll get younger next season. The Red Wings could even take a half step down next season. Plus, they're going to be at the cap ceiling this year. If Hronek were still in Detroit, Yzerman would have trouble giving him $6.5 million, let alone the $7 million that he's asking for right now on a new contract. The Red Wings would make this trade again. And this is one of the things as well. You can talk about this from a wins and a losses standpoint. You can say that for Detroit, they got themselves a bunch of extra assets, they have some extra roster spots, and now they have all this cap room to move around with Seider and Raymond. They're not hampered down by a Filip Hronek negotiation that would certainly cause as much havoc in Detroit as it is in Vancouver right now. But you could also talk about this from the Vancouver Canucks point of view. Was this trade, Hronek for the ASP pick, a losing trade? And honestly, I'm going to say probably not, because with Filip Hronek comes a lot of value. He was a good player for Vancouver in the first half of the year. The second half, it was reported that he was kind of banged up. There were some things maybe going on with his elbow, but he himself said in the postseason press conference that he was totally fine, albeit in a very blunt and sarcastic way. But Filip Hronek may not have had that same kind of impact if he was playing in Detroit. We already highlighted this, but who's to say that the Hronek that was super amazing and one of the top defensemen in points at the beginning of the season would have been the same guy in Detroit? If you go over to Hronek's game log, I mean, the guy was so good. He was literally one of the top defensemen in scoring around the November-December period of the NHL scoring race. So I feel like that would kind of be a bit too much of an ask if Detroit still had Filip Hronek. Nevertheless, when you talk about the Canucks, sure, there are conversations about Hronek leaving and them trading him away, but at the end of the day, they do have control here. He is an RFA, not a UFA. They didn't make this trade for Hronek being a rental, they made this trade with him being a controllable asset. They can trade him if they want to, they can let him go to an offer sheet if they want to, they can get compensation for that. There isn't a loss here, unless there is just straight up a big fallout and Filip Hronek for some reason goes to UFA status because the Canucks don't qualify his offer. Like, that's sort of the danger, worst case scenario territory, but it's probably not going to happen. They're not going to trade all this stuff away for free. But essentially, if you want to talk about the moving around of assets for Vancouver, you talk about what was initially acquired to get Hronek in the first place. That 17th overall pick from New York, that was acquired by Vancouver from the Bo Horvat trade with Anthony Beauvillier and all that other stuff. So if you wanted to go up the trade tree, Filip Hronek, technically the proxy acquisition from the Bo Horvat deal. Honestly, the Vancouver Canucks were really good at center this season for the most part. I mean, Elias Pettersson was still not great, but they were getting good support elsewhere throughout the lineup. It makes it so that that trade with Bo, sending him out for the pick, sending the pick over to Detroit for Hronek, still provided the Canucks with a defenseman that helped them out a lot. And even if he doesn't stick around for the long term, there's still assets you can recuperate by moving on from this player. And so even though Steve Yzerman might have made a really smart move here, and it's so good that you might even mistake him for having some sort of a hindsight mirror on the wall to let him know that this kind of thing was going to happen, it's almost like the best kind of bullet dodged for Detroit. Because if Hronek was as good in Detroit as he is in Vancouver, which I don't think was possible, but if he was, then maybe you have this entire thing over there instead of in Vancouver. You're going to have to balance out three main RFAs, Seider, Raymond, Hronek, all at the same time. And that, of course, would get difficult when you're trying to negotiate two right-handed defensemen against each other, pretty much, fighting for the same cap room and fighting for the same roster spot next year, too. So, Detroit Red Wings fans, let me know your thoughts in the comment section below about the idea of Filip Hronek being a bullet dodged for the Detroit Red Wings, how Stevie Y might have just dodged a bullet, and whether or not you think this version of Hronek that we had seen in Vancouver actually could have existed in Detroit had he stuck around with your team. Thoughts in the comment section as well, how you think the Red Wings would have done if Hronek was a part of your squad rather than the ASP pick. I mean, Axel Sandin-Pellikka is fantastic, but what if you had Hronek on your team right now? Thoughts in the comment section as to where your direction goes, and if you're a Canucks fan, what are your opinions about this guy as well? I hope you enjoyed this video, and bye.